What if the very thing that's been draining your confidence is your constant need to be seen by her? Think about it. How often have you caught yourself checking your phone, hoping she noticed you, liked your post, replied to your message? How many times have you replayed conversations in your head, wondering if you said the right thing, if she felt impressed, if she saw your worth? This constant pull, this hunger for her attention, her validation, it doesn't feel like a game anymore. It feels like chains, heavy ones. And the truth is, she'll never tell you this, but every time you reach out first, every time you show that you're still available, still waiting, still affected, it feeds her ego, quietly, silently, but completely. She doesn't need to respond. She doesn't need to acknowledge it. Just knowing you're still emotionally tied to her gives her a sense of power. It tells her she still matters more than you want to admit. And here's the part that hurts most. She won't stop you. She won't say, hey, stop giving me this attention. It's not fair to you. Because the world has conditioned her to expect it, to feed off it. And every time you hand it over, you lose a little more of yourself. But you're here because something inside of you knows it's time to stop playing that role. It's time to step back, not in bitterness, not in anger, but in power. Because the second you stop giving her the energy she didn't earn, everything starts to change. She feels the silence. She senses the absence. But more than that, you feel the shift. You feel your mind clearing. You feel your worth returning. And it's addictive. She won't admit this part either. The moment you stop giving her validation, the ground beneath her shakes. She's used to being the center. She's used to being chased. And when you no longer play your part in that script, the illusion she built of herself starts to fracture. You won't hear her say it. But deep down, she'll feel it. And it will bother her. Because the ego doesn't die in confrontation, it dies in silence, in being ignored, in becoming irrelevant to someone who once cared. That's your power now, not in proving your worth to her, not in becoming what she wants, but in becoming someone who no longer needs to be noticed to feel valuable. And if you stay with me till the end of this message, you'll understand exactly how to become that man, the one she can't control, the one she can't forget, and the one her ego was never prepared to face. Because once you reclaim your energy and stop giving it to someone who never deserved it, the world opens up. You don't just get her attention anymore, you get your life back. And trust me, that is the beginning of everything. Her ego doesn't crave love, it craves control. And your pursuit is the fuel. Every time you go out of your way to be noticed, every time you check in when she didn't ask, every time you try to prove you're the one, you're feeding a fire that doesn't warm you, it burns you. Because the more you chase, the more you shrink. And the more you shrink, the bigger her ego gets. That ego won't tell you to stop. It won't thank you. It won't give back what you pour in. It will just expect more. You've been taught that effort means love, that chasing means commitment, that giving means loyalty. But what it really shows when it's not returned is desperation. Not because you are desperate, but because the energy you give says, I'm afraid to lose you more than I'm afraid to lose myself. That mindset is exactly what destroys your self-respect. It's why she pulls away when you get closer. It's why she grows colder the more emotionally available you become. Because people don't value what they don't work for. And if she didn't earn your energy, she won't respect it. It's not about punishing her. It's about protecting you. The man who constantly gives without receiving isn't showing love. He's giving away his power. And whether she realizes it or not, that imbalance quietly feeds her ego while starving your spirit. She'll never tell you that your availability turns into invisibility. She won't say that your presence becomes background noise when it's always there. But you feel it. Deep down you know something's off. That's not how respect works. That's not how connection is built. It's time to see what your attention is truly worth. Because the moment you stop giving it freely, without being met halfway, you stop bleeding emotionally, and she starts noticing. Not because you're playing games, but because you've finally woken up. You've stopped begging for a seat at a table you built. And when you do that, her ego, the one that stood tall on your pursuit, starts to wobble. The shift is powerful. You no longer text first. You no longer check if she saw your story. You no longer try to impress her. Instead, you invest that energy into your purpose, your peace, your power. And whether she admits it or not, that shift changes everything. She starts to question. She starts to wonder. Because the man who used to orbit around her is now walking his own path. Silent, focused, unavailable. Not because he's playing hard to get, but because he finally got himself. That version of you, that's what destroys her ego. Not revenge, not anger, just growth. Quiet, undeniable growth. You don't need her to notice you anymore. You need you to notice you. That's where the real transformation begins, not in being seen, but in being solid, grounded, free. And the man who no longer seeks approval becomes the man who commands respect without ever having to ask for it. When you stop chasing, you create space. And in that space, you find something far more valuable than her approval. You find clarity. You begin to see who you've become trying to impress her. You start to notice how much of yourself you've bent, reshaped, or silenced just to be accepted. The truth is, the man you truly are doesn't need to perform. He doesn't need to reach, explain, or beg. He simply stands in quiet confidence, knowing that his presence is a privilege, not a given. That kind of energy doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be seen. It radiates. And when you begin to embody that, she feels it. She won't say it. Her pride won't allow it. But her ego feels the distance like a wound it can't heal. The moment you become emotionally detached, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about yourself, everything changes. Detachment is not absence of emotion. It's the refusal to be controlled by it. It's choosing peace over chaos, stability over drama, worth over desperation. And when you operate from that place, you become powerful, not just attractive, magnetic. Because men who don't chase can't be toyed with. Men who no longer react with neediness become a mystery. And nothing challenges a woman's ego more than a man she no longer has influence over. She may act indifferent. She might pretend it doesn't matter. But silence speaks louder than begging ever could. And when you stop giving her access to your energy, she loses a mirror she used to admire herself in. Your attention was her reflection. Your pursuit made her feel chosen. But now, she has to face herself, alone, without the constant reminder that someone out there still worships her. And that's what her ego can't stand. Not losing you, but losing the image of herself that was created through your desire. You're no longer the man who chases, you're the man who chooses. And when you reclaim that power, the dynamic flips. You stop asking if you're enough for her and start asking if she's enough for you. That shift, internal, silent, unshakable, breaks every game. Because a woman can't manipulate a man who is already fulfilled. She can't confuse someone who has nothing to prove. She can't damage someone who isn't emotionally invested in her opinion anymore. This is the energy that elevates your life. You stop giving your best to someone who didn't earn it. You start giving it to your discipline, your health, your vision. And that's the beginning of peace. You're not cold. You're just no longer accessible to chaos. You're not distant. You're just close to your purpose. That's what makes you powerful. And when she feels that power, she'll never admit it out loud, but inside, her ego will crumble. Not because you hurt her, but because you finally chose yourself. And once you do that, everything else starts chasing you. Confidence isn't what you say. It's what you don't need to explain. It's the quiet in your voice when you know who you are, even when no one's watching. And nothing destroys her ego faster than realizing your validation doesn't come from her approval anymore. She was used to the compliments, the likes, the attention. She fed on it, even if she acted like she didn't care. But now the supply is cut. Not in bitterness, in strength. You've grown into someone who doesn't seek external permission to feel valuable. And when a man gets to that level, the entire game shifts in his favor. Because confidence that isn't performed is impossible to manipulate. You don't chase, you attract, you don't explain, you decide. And it's not about arrogance, it's about alignment. When your energy aligns with your purpose, you naturally become distant from people who only wanted you distracted. She may have liked you more when you were uncertain, when you questioned yourself, when you overcompensated. But now, you walk like a man who doesn't need to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. That energy can't be faked. It's built through pain, through distance, through solitude, through the moments when you stopped texting, stopped checking, stopped hoping she'd come around, and instead started becoming. She'll never tell you, but when she sees you calm, centered, unaffected, it unsettles her because she remembers how much control she had. She remembers the old you, the version that needed her attention to feel alive. But this new version, the one who stands tall without her, who glows without her praise, that version forces her to confront the one thing her ego can't process: irrelevance, not rejection, not hate, irrelevance, being forgotten, being unseen. And when you pull back all the energy you once gave her, you force her to sit with that silence. Confidence built in solitude is unbreakable. It's not based on what she thinks, it's based on what you know. You know your value. You know your direction. You know what you bring to the table. And you don't need to prove it. That stillness speaks louder than any desperate words ever could. And the more rooted you become in your own self-worth, the more people around you begin to feel your shift, even if they don't understand it, especially her. You're no longer seeking validation. You've become the source of it. And that energy doesn't just repel manipulation. It attracts genuine respect. You move different. You speak less. You observe more. And her ego, once fed by your neediness, begins to starve. Because she can't feed off a man who feeds himself. She can't own a mind that thinks independently. And she can't break a spirit that's no longer looking for comfort in her presence. You've reclaimed your value. Now walk like it. Breathe like it. Live like it. And let her feel the absence of the man she thought she could keep small. When you pull away, it forces her to feel something she's been running from. Doubt. Doubt in her control. Doubt in her hold on you. Doubt in her own worth. Because when a man stops chasing, it disrupts the fantasy she built around herself. She expected to always be the one pursued, the one chosen, the one who gets to decide when you're enough. But now, you flip that dynamic without saying a word. You're not proving anything. You're not explaining. You've simply detached. And that detachment creates a silence so loud, it echoes in her mind. She can't ignore it. Because deep down she knows it was never about love. It was about power. And now that she's lost it, the image she held of herself begins to break. You're not punishing her. You're protecting your value. You're showing that your energy is no longer free. That your time is no longer available to anyone who didn't appreciate it when it was overflowing. This is how a man reclaims his life, not with anger, but with absence, with distance, with focus. You give her nothing to react to, nothing to pull on, nothing to control. And that creates a vacuum, a space where her ego once lived, now filled with uncertainty. That's the wound. Not your departure, but the realization that she no longer has the power to pull you back. You've become rare, not because you play games, but because you've stopped giving your power away for nothing in return. You no longer text out of impulse. You no longer check in just to be noticed. Your mind is on growth. Your energy is on purpose. And without even trying, you've become the question she can't answer, the silence she can't escape, the man she can't manipulate. Because detachment creates mystery, and mystery disrupts control. She'll never admit it, but that silence bothers her more than any argument ever could. She doesn't miss the old you. She misses the access, the validation, the security of knowing you were still waiting, still hoping, still reaching. That version of you made her feel important. This version makes her feel insecure, because now you walk like a man who doesn't care what she thinks. You've stopped reacting, you've stopped explaining, and that leaves her ego with nothing to stand on. The more you distance yourself, the more her mind begins to do what it never had to do before, wonder. And that wondering isn't curiosity. It's discomfort, because she's starting to realize that the man who once made her feel like the prize is now out of reach. Not because he found someone else, but because he found himself. That's the moment her ego breaks, not from your rejection, but from the brutal truth that you stopped needing her to feel complete. You don't chase anymore because there's nothing missing in you. And now, you've become the man she never saw coming, the one she can't control, the one she can't forget. Your attention was never free. It just looked that way because you didn't realize its value, but now you do. Now you understand that your energy, your focus, your presence is a currency. And the moment you stop spending it on people who didn't earn it, your life begins to change. Her ego thrived on your investment. Every compliment, every double text, every unnecessary apology, it gave her a sense of control she never had to work for. But the moment you go silent, when you stop giving her the attention she relied on to feel powerful, the withdrawal hits. Not because she loved you deeply, but because your attention was a mirror she used to see herself more clearly. And now that mirror is gone. And she's left to face what's really there, without your reflection propping it up. She'll pretend she doesn't notice. She'll act like she doesn't care. But ego doesn't handle silence well. Ego survives off recognition. It survives off being wanted, being needed, being validated. When you take that away, not with words, but with your calm disinterest, something begins to break inside her. And no, she won't show it. She may even get louder, post more, try to seem untouchable. But every performance is just a distraction from the growing emptiness your absence exposed. You've become disciplined with your attention. You've realized it's not a gift to be thrown at anyone who looks your way. It's a standard, a filter, a test. Who values you when you're no longer chasing? Who shows up when you stop initiating? Who earns the version of you that listens, cares, and gives? Because that version is powerful, that version is focused, and only the worthy should ever experience it. The best thing you ever did wasn't walking away. It was learning to redirect your energy. Back into your goals. Back into your peace. Back into the quiet rebuilding of the man you were always meant to be. Now you're not reacting. You're responding to life with clarity. You're not seeking permission. You're moving with purpose. You're not begging to be seen. You are seeing yourself. Her ego never expected this. It was prepared for a version of you that couldn't let go, that would keep coming back, explaining, apologizing, trying again. But you've gone silent. Not because you're weak, because you've evolved. You're no longer interested in convincing someone of your worth. You're no longer afraid of being alone. You've embraced the solitude, and in doing so, you've reclaimed your freedom. The man who knows his attention is valuable stops offering it to those who waste it. And when she feels that loss, not just of you, but of what you represented, something inside her shifts. She won't say it. She may not even fully understand it, but her ego will feel the weight of being replaced by your peace. And there's no comeback from that. Because once you've tasted the power of your own presence, you'll never give it away so easily again. She won't admit it, but the man who outgrows her shakes her at the core, not because he left, not because he found someone else, but because he no longer needs her. That's the fracture her ego can't repair. When she looks back and sees the version of you that once bent over backwards, that once waited for replies, that once put her on a pedestal, and then compares it to the man you are now, the contrast is undeniable. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not distant. You're elevated. And what once inflated her ego now threatens it. Because evolution in silence is a quiet form of revenge, and she can feel every inch of it, even if you've said nothing at all. The power isn't in proving her wrong. The power is in becoming so right within yourself that her opinion becomes irrelevant. You no longer move to earn her approval. You move because you've built momentum that no one can slow down. She may try to pretend you were never important, that she doesn't notice your change. But that's just pride masking fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being replaced by your purpose. Fear of losing a man who finally saw himself clearly. Because once you've built yourself back from the fragments of needing her, you no longer break when she walks away. You stand stronger than before. She wanted control. What she got instead was distance. And that distance exposed her. Because when you stop showing up, she's forced to realize that she was never your piece, she was your test. And you passed. You didn't fail because it ended. You won because it changed you. You took back what she took for granted. You reclaimed what you once gave too easily. And now, without saying a word, you've become the standard. The version of you that no longer reaches is the version she'll remember most. Because the hardest man to forget is the one who refused to stay broken for her comfort. Let that truth anchor you. You don't need closure. You don't need her to understand. You don't need her validation to confirm what you already know. You've become a man who no longer chases, not because you lost the desire, but because you found direction. The more you grow, the smaller she feels in the space she used to dominate. Not because she's less, but because you've become more, and she'll feel that shift in every part of her, even if she never says a word. Her silence doesn't mean she's unaffected. Her ego just won't let her show it. But behind the posts, behind the smile, behind the games, she knows. She lost access to the man who outgrew the version of himself she used to control, and the silence you gave her wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of your becoming. You didn't lose her. You found you. And that truth will echo louder in her mind than any words ever could. She doesn't know how to handle the man who's no longer emotionally available, because she was used to the version of you who reacted, the version who explained himself, who sought reassurance, who apologized just to keep the peace. That man gave her power. But the one you've become now, he gives her nothing. No reaction, no need for closure, no permission to re-enter. You're not playing hard to get. You're just hard to reach because you finally understand your worth. And that unavailability makes her question everything she thought she understood. Her ego expected your loyalty to stay tied to her memory. But now she's watching it collapse, quietly, under the weight of your silence. She was never prepared for your peace. She was ready for arguments, for emotional tension, for the usual back and forth. But stillness, presence, discipline, that breaks the cycle, because when you're no longer fighting to be heard, you become louder than ever. Your absence doesn't whisper. It roars, and it tells her everything she doesn't want to admit, that she was never the source of your value, that she only held power when you forgot who you were, that your emotions were never hers to control, only yours to reclaim. Now she sees you building, glowing, choosing, and what used to make her feel adored now makes her feel replaced, not by another woman, but by purpose, by focus, by progress, and that's the part her ego never saw coming. She thought if you left, you'd break, that you'd come back. But you didn't. You grew. And every inch of growth you've earned in silence becomes a reminder that she no longer has access. You're not bitter, you're just unavailable, and that reality cuts deeper than anything you could ever say. You've shifted from emotional dependence to emotional discipline. You've stopped placing your peace in someone else's hands. That shift doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. You no longer exist to be chosen. You've become the one who chooses. You decide who gets your time. You decide who earns your attention, and the man who lives from that space becomes untouchable. Because once you realize that your value is self-defined, you stop waiting for anyone else to recognize it. She won't admit what she feels. Her pride won't allow it. But the silence is louder now. The energy is different. She senses that the version of you who once needed her no longer exists, and it rattles her, because in losing your attention, she lost the illusion that she was the prize. But a man on a mission doesn't chase illusions. He walks with vision. He speaks with clarity. He loves with standards. And that kind of man, he doesn't need her validation. He already has his own. She destroyed the version of you that chased. But in doing so, she created the version of you that leads. And that's the version she can never control again. The moment you stop proving yourself, everything changes. Her ego thrived when you tried to convince her of your worth. Every time you explained your intentions, defended your actions, or tried to win her over, you handed her control. Not because you were weak, but because you believed love was something you had to earn. But now you've stopped trying. Not out of spite, out of strength. Because the truth is, nothing needs to be proven when you know who you are. That kind of self-assurance doesn't beg to be accepted. It commands respect. And when she no longer sees you trying to gain her approval, her ego starts to panic. The game is over when you stop playing. She was used to being the one who decided if you were enough. But now, that power is gone. You've reclaimed the position she once held in your mind. You no longer ask, what does she think of me? You ask, does this serve my growth? That shift destroys the dynamic she depended on. Because when a man no longer needs to be validated by her, she's left with nothing to control. You don't chase her compliments. You don't wait for her praise. You've detached from the performance, and in doing so, you've set yourself free. Your silence says what words never could. You're done explaining why you're valuable. You're done trying to be understood by someone who chose confusion over clarity. Your actions speak now. Your presence, your focus, your consistency, they communicate everything. You've grown past the need for recognition. And ironically, that's when it starts coming. Not because you demanded it, but because you became undeniable. And that energy is something her ego can't manipulate. There's power in restraint. Power in not texting. Power in not reacting. Power in walking away without making a scene. When she sees you no longer fighting for her attention, it exposes her dependence on your pursuit. She may have pretended she didn't notice before, but she always did. And now, when she sees you calm, composed, and unbothered, she realizes you've transcended the game entirely. That realization doesn't just bruise her pride, it shatters it. You didn't lose her. You lost the need to seek her approval. And in doing so, you gained something far greater, self-possession. You now move with clarity. You act with intention. You speak with purpose. That's the energy that separates men who try from men who know. She may not admit it, but your refusal to keep proving yourself is what shakes her most. Because she thought your worth depended on her recognition. But now she sees the truth. You were always the one with value. She just wasn't ready to meet it. And now, you're done lowering your standards just to be accepted. You've stopped chasing people who only wanted access, not connection. You've let go of the need to be chosen. And in doing so, you became the one who chooses. That's the man her ego can't handle. Emotional independence is the weapon she never saw coming. The moment you stopped relying on her attention to feel seen, on her affection to feel valued, or on her approval to feel enough, everything inside her started to shift. Because for the first time, your peace no longer lives in her hands. She doesn't get to decide your worth. She doesn't get to decide your mood. She doesn't get to dictate how high or low you feel. You've cut the emotional cord, and that terrifies her, because the man who doesn't need her is the one who forces her to face herself, not through arguments, not through revenge, through calm distance and unshakable peace. Emotional independence means you no longer break when she pulls away. You no longer spiral when she goes silent. You no longer chase when she withdraws. You stay grounded, still, focused. You don't crumble because you've already built the foundation inside yourself. Your self-worth is no longer a mirror she holds up. It's a fire you carry within. And now she's the one watching from the outside, wondering how she lost the version of you who once made her the center of everything. When you detach emotionally, you stop being reactive. She no longer controls your highs and lows. Her mood swings don't shake your peace. Her games no longer reach your heart. You see it all, and yet you don't respond with desperation. You've elevated above it. And that elevation is exactly what exposes the imbalance that once existed. You see clearly now. You see who she was when you were too blind to walk away. You see the manipulation for what it was, not love, but control. And now that you've taken that control back, her ego doesn't know where to stand. She may try to test you. She may try to pull you back in with half-effort attention, breadcrumbs of interest, moments of softness. But you've outgrown the need to be validated by inconsistency. You're not moved by temporary affection. You're not stirred by shallow displays of emotion, because you've learned that nothing is more attractive than peace. Nothing feels better than being emotionally free. And no moment of connection is worth trading your inner strength for. Now, you give love from overflow, not emptiness. You offer presence, not obsession. You choose loyalty, but not at the cost of yourself. And when you operate from that space, the world responds differently. You attract with depth. You connect with clarity. You lead with purpose. You're no longer chasing something outside to complete something inside. You're whole. And that wholeness is louder than any declaration. It's felt. It's known. It's powerful. She won't say it. Her pride won't let her. But deep inside, she feels the shift. You don't depend on her anymore. You don't crave her reaction. You don't need her attention to feel like a man. You've built something stronger than her validation. You've built your center. And from that center, no one has the power to shake you again. There's a quiet kind of strength that only shows up when you've had enough. Not loud, not angry, not dramatic. Just a calm decision that you will no longer hand your power to someone who never valued it. That silence speaks louder than begging ever could. It says, I've seen enough, I've felt enough, I've outgrown the space where you once held control. And the man who arrives at that place isn't bitter, he's focused. He's not chasing closure. He's not stuck in the loop of what ifs. He's too busy becoming the version of himself that no longer tolerates emotional confusion disguised as love. She expected you to stay attached, to stay accessible, to stay predictable, because her ego depended on the comfort of knowing she could always pull you back with the smallest effort. A delayed reply, a compliment, a reminder of how things used to feel. But now she's facing a version of you that doesn't move when she moves. A version that doesn't react to her absence or overextend in her presence. And that stillness, unshaken, composed, free, is exactly what her ego wasn't built to handle. You're not ignoring her to get a reaction. You're not withholding attention to manipulate. You're simply no longer available to anything that drains your energy or disrupts your peace. That decision didn't come from spite. It came from clarity, from the realization that a man's value is never found in how much he's willing to tolerate, but in how high he's willing to rise when he stops settling. And you've risen, quietly, relentlessly, without needing her to notice. Now your energy feels different. You walk into every space without needing to prove a thing. You don't seek eyes. You command respect without saying a word. That's what happens when you fought for your self-worth and finally won. You no longer beg to be seen. You're too busy seeing yourself, and the glow that comes from that level of healing cannot be faked. It can't be mimicked. It can only be earned. She won't admit what she's lost. Her pride won't let her. But every time she sees you now, online, in person, or even in memory, she feels it. The distance, the shift, the power. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally became you, unapologetically, fully, unshakably. And the man who becomes whole without her approval becomes the man she can never control again. That's what breaks her ego, not your anger, not your silence, but your peace, your refusal to go back, your unshakable commitment to your evolution. You no longer need her to understand what she lost. You understand what you gained. And from this point forward, you walk differently. You love differently. You lead differently. Because the man who once chased has turned into the man no one sees coming, but everyone feels when he enters the room. Power doesn't come from attention. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, when your energy matches your standards, and when your presence reflects your growth, you become untouchable. You're no longer pulled by impulse. You're led by vision. And that shift changes everything. You stop being the man who waits to be chosen, and you become the man who walks away from anything that no longer fits the future he's building. That's the version of you her ego can't reach. Not because you blocked her, not because you hate her, but because you no longer orbit around her. You've stepped into your own gravity. She wanted you dependent. She needed you emotionally invested in her moods, her words, her reactions, because that gave her control. But now, she feels the distance between who you were and who you've become. She can't predict you anymore. She can't read you. And most of all, she can't move you. You're too stable, too focused, too self-aware. Her absence doesn't create chaos in your world. It creates space for clarity. And that clarity shows you how much peace you were trading for the illusion of love. That clarity reveals how often you mistook inconsistency for chemistry and how long you were holding on to potential instead of reality. Now you don't flinch when she pulls away. You don't rush to fix what isn't yours to repair. You've learned that not every connection is meant to last, and not every loss is really a loss. Some disconnections are actually realignments. Some rejections are redirections. You've stopped taking things personally. You've stopped trying to control outcomes. You've started trusting yourself, and that trust becomes your foundation. That's what gives you strength when emotions rise. That's what grounds you when memories whisper. You don't go back, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. This isn't about proving anything to her. This is about proving everything to yourself. That you can walk away from what doesn't serve you. That you can let go of the version of you that used to beg, chase, and break just to be seen. You've earned the right to stand tall. You've earned the right to be proud of the man you've become. And no amount of nostalgia or emotional bait will drag you back into that old version of yourself. Because the man you are now isn't available for manipulation. He's not available for half love. He's not available for anything less than mutual respect and real alignment. She won't say it, but your growth disturbs her ego, not because you're trying to hurt her, but because she expected you to stay stuck. And when you didn't, she had to face the truth, that you were always more powerful than she realized, that the version of you who walked away wasn't lost, he was evolving. And now you're no longer part of her story. You've outgrown the chapter she tried to keep you trapped in. The most dangerous man is the one who no longer seeks to be understood. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your energy. You're no longer trapped in cycles of overcommunication, trying to be seen, trying to be validated, trying to make someone recognize your worth. That version of you is gone. The man who remains is silent, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. You've realized that understanding isn't owed where respect is missing. And when you stop needing someone to get you, to choose you, to validate you, they lose their power over you completely. That's when everything shifts. That's when you stop being predictable. That's when her ego feels the fracture. She built a sense of control on the foundation of your emotional openness, your vulnerability, your consistent presence. But when that foundation disappeared, so did her grip. Now, she can't read you. She can't anticipate your next move. She doesn't know if you care or if you've completely disconnected. And that mystery eats away at her pride. Because the man who once gave everything now gives nothing without intention. He no longer reacts to breadcrumbs. He no longer waits by the phone. He no longer lives in her shadow. He's in his light now. You stopped talking. You started moving. You stopped chasing. You started choosing. You no longer respond to drama. You don't engage in emotional chess matches. You've made peace more important than presence. And that peace cannot be faked. It's the kind of peace that comes when you realize you were the gift all along. Not the one trying to earn a place, not the one proving your worth, the one who finally saw it. And when a man sees his worth clearly, no game, no tactic, no silence can shake him. She won't say it, but your withdrawal disrupted her entire strategy. You were supposed to stay affected. You were supposed to stay emotionally available, always in reach, always needing something from her. But you don't. You've stopped needing anything she can offer because everything she held over you, affection, attention, closure, you've already given to yourself. And when you stop needing something from someone, they lose the ability to manipulate you with it. This is what it means to reclaim your center. To no longer chase what you used to crave, to no longer fold for the sake of temporary comfort. You've trained yourself to walk away from what drains you. You've trained your mind to recognize patterns, not words. And that discipline protects your heart without turning it cold. It keeps you open to love but closed to games. Strong, but not hardened. Grounded, but not desperate. She may never speak it aloud, but her ego has already felt the consequences. Because nothing damages someone's pride like watching the person they once controlled walk away without anger, without noise, without need, just quiet strength. That's what destroys her ego. Not revenge, not resentment. Just your presence, elevated beyond her reach. Your evolution is silent, but it's undeniable. It speaks through your discipline, through your absence, through the fact that her presence no longer dictates your emotions. You've stopped waiting for her to realize your worth because you've realized it yourself. You no longer hope she comes around. You've come home to yourself. That shift doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you sovereign. You're no longer a man hoping to be chosen. You are the one who chooses. And when that becomes your mindset, everything about you changes. Your energy becomes sacred. Your time becomes expensive. Your standards become non-negotiable. The man who once tolerated confusion now demands clarity. The man who once sought peace from others now protects it within. You've learned to separate attention from affection, desire from devotion, presence from intention. You no longer confuse her temporary warmth with lasting value. You don't chase the high of being noticed. You anchor into the peace of being steady. And in that steadiness, you become rare, because most don't have the patience to become whole. But you did. You faced the discomfort of detachment. You endured the silence that follows growth. You stood tall when everything inside you wanted to shrink just to be seen. And now you stand taller than ever, not because of her, but in spite of her. She may try to resurface, not because she misses you, but because she misses what you gave her. The constant reassurance, the emotional energy, the loyalty she never had to earn. But you've changed the locks. Access to you isn't given through history, it's earned through respect. You don't revisit the past when you're too busy building the future. You don't give second chances to someone who mishandled your first, not out of bitterness, out of wisdom, out of self-respect, out of the truth that your peace is no longer for sale. That's what her ego can't admit, that you became unavailable not because someone replaced her, but because you upgraded your standards. You stopped entertaining connections that lacked depth. You stopped tolerating emotions that felt unstable. You stopped giving your best to people who showed up with half effort. And when you made that decision, you became dangerous to everything that once fed off your self-doubt. Now your energy is different. You walk slower. You speak less. You observe more. You don't rush to fix. You don't beg to stay. You don't need to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You simply move forward. Calm, clear, certain. And that movement says everything your silence never could. You've outgrown the version of you that settled. You've buried the mindset that needed permission. And you've built a new identity, one that stands on foundation, not approval. One that values depth over distraction. One that speaks without words. That identity isn't just powerful, it's permanent. And no matter how many times she looks back, she'll never be able to reach the man who finally realized he was never beneath her, only hidden from himself. You stopped being her option the day you started being your own priority. The shift wasn't loud, but it was final. You no longer explain your silence. You no longer overextend for someone who never matched your effort. You finally saw the truth. It was never about being enough for her. It was about being too much for someone not ready to rise to your level. That realization changed everything. It cut the cord that once kept you tied to her validation. And now she watches from a distance, wondering why her hold disappeared. Her pride can't admit it, but your absence speaks louder than anything you ever said. You no longer move from emotion. You move from purpose. That discipline makes you untouchable to the chaos that once pulled you in. Where she used to stir your peace with silence or mixed signals, you now remain calm, grounded, and unmoved. Not because you don't feel, but because you've mastered what to give your feelings to. That control is what breaks her ego. She can't reach the version of you who's no longer reactive. She can't provoke a response from the man who built his identity without needing hers to survive. You're not bitter. You're beyond it. You've replaced resentment with self-respect. You don't wish her harm. You simply wish her distance. Because anything that costs your peace is too expensive now. And what used to feel like love now looks like distraction. You've cleared the fog. You see her as she is, not as you hoped she'd be. You've stopped romanticizing potential. You've started honoring reality. And the reality is, she didn't lose you when she walked away. She lost you when she thought you'd always wait. You've stepped into something she can't fake. Elevation. She can mirror your confidence, mimic your detachment, copy your stillness. But imitation is fragile. Yours is real. Yours was earned in the quiet moments of choosing growth over comfort, self-control over reaction, solitude over shallow connection. And the result is a presence that exposes everything false. You no longer entertain what doesn't align. You no longer explain what's already obvious. And when you walk now, it's with the power of a man who doesn't need closure. Because he is the closure. There's nothing louder than peace in a world addicted to noise. She won't admit how deeply that silence cuts. She'll pretend it doesn't affect her. But her ego knows. It knows it's no longer in control. It knows it's no longer the center of your attention. It knows that the man who used to revolve around her now moves in a different orbit entirely. And that shift, calm, quiet, unannounced, is irreversible. You didn't just grow, you separated. You didn't just detach, you ascended. You became the version of yourself that no longer asks to be chosen. You are the choice now. And no matter how far she reaches, she'll never touch the man who finally chose himself over her ego. You reached a point where peace mattered more than presence, where your growth demanded silence from anything that once drained your power. You didn't abandon her, you returned to yourself, and in that return you realized something life-changing, that your value was never missing, it was just misplaced, given too freely to someone who never earned it. But once you stopped giving without reciprocity, the illusion broke. And what remained was truth, truth about what you deserved, truth about how deeply you were compromising, truth about how long you were shrinking just to be held by hands that didn't know how to handle you. Now, you're not angry, you're aligned, you're not distant, you're discerning. And that version of you, the one who knows his worth, who guards his energy, who walks with intention, is the version her ego can't reach. She was used to the man who tolerated chaos for connection, who confused emotional intensity with love, who stayed when he should have walked. But now, you've become the man who chooses stability over sparks, depth over drama, respect over attention. And that choice isn't loud or showy, it's quiet, strong, uncompromising. The kind of choice that speaks through actions, not arguments. Her ego thrived when you needed her to feel whole, but now you are whole. Not because someone finally saw you, but because you finally saw yourself. You stopped waiting to be picked. You stopped hoping to be rescued. You became the one who saves himself. And that shift is irreversible. Once you realize you are the peace you were searching for in her, you stop chasing shadows and start building light. Light that comes from discipline, from healing, from walking away not in pain, but in power. She might return, not to love you, but to test if the door is still open. But now you protect that door. You've reinforced it with standards, with boundaries, with purpose. She no longer has access to the version of you who needed her validation, because that version of you has evolved. He's gone. Replaced by a man who no longer explains his growth, no longer apologizes for his standards, no longer waters himself down to keep someone else comfortable. That kind of man is magnetic, not because he tries, but because he no longer needs to. She won't say it. She might even act like you never mattered. But her silence is just pride disguising regret, because she can feel it, the gap between who you were and who you've become. And what bruises her ego isn't that you left, it's that you never looked back, that you outgrew her without asking for permission, that you became what she said you'd never be, the man who didn't just walk away, but walked into his power fully. And now, no matter how many times she replays it in her mind, the truth remains, the version of you who once needed her is gone. And what stands in his place is everything she never expected, a man beyond her reach. There's a certain silence that speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. It's the silence of a man who's done explaining, done defending, done trying to make someone see his worth. That silence doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from healing. from rising, from realizing that proving yourself to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you is the fastest way to lose yourself. And you're done losing yourself. You're done negotiating your peace for the comfort of someone else's pride. You've stepped into a version of yourself that doesn't beg to be valued. You are the value. And you carry it with quiet strength, not loud declarations. Your power now is in your presence. It's not something you force. It's something you've become. You're not seeking to be seen anymore because you see yourself clearly, fully, without distortion. And that self-clarity radiates. It challenges anyone who once saw you as weak, anyone who once thought they could come and go as they pleased. Now they feel the wall, not a wall of anger, but of growth, a boundary made of earned wisdom and unshakable self-respect. She feels it even if she can't name it, because when a man finds himself, he stops being anyone else's emotional crutch. You no longer argue with the past. You don't revisit conversations that were designed to confuse. You don't chase closure from the very source of your damage. Because now you understand that not every story needs an ending when the lesson is already learned. You've become the kind of man who doesn't need permission to move on. You move on because your spirit demands it, because your future deserves it, because staying small to be accepted is no longer an option. There's nothing more humbling to someone's ego than realizing they no longer affect you, that their name doesn't trigger emotion, that their presence doesn't disturb your balance, that their approval holds no weight in your decisions. You've removed them from the throne they never earned, and you've taken your place as the authority in your own life, not with arrogance, but with truth, with alignment, with unshakable direction. And that direction doesn't point back to her. It points forward, to more, to better, to higher. She won't admit it, but the version of you she expected to wait around, to remain available, to keep his heart open to her indecision, that man no longer exists. And that reality is more painful than any words you could say, because her power came from your doubt, from your confusion, from your emotional dependence, and now all of that is gone. Replaced with clarity, certainty, strength, she didn't just lose your attention, she lost access to the man who once saw her as the center of his world. Now you've made yourself the center, and from that center you build, you lead, you protect, and nothing she says, does, or regrets can ever undo the man you chose to become.